Hello and welcome to the Hustle and Bustle podcast. Before we begin, I would like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land on which this podcast is being recorded, the Yugambeh people, and pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging. My name's Nicole Bennett and I'm an urban and regional planner, and I'm the host of this podcast. Each episode I bring you conversations with city shapers and urban thinkers, leaders in the field of urban planning and city building. I'm located here on the beautiful Gold Coast in Australia. We're one of the host cities for the Brisbane 2032 Olympics and Paralympics. The next 10 years is being described as the golden decade for our city and our region. The conversations on this podcast help us understand the opportunities and challenges ahead. So let's take a minute from our busy hustle and bustle day and let's have a great conversation. And welcome to episode 17 for 2022. Today I'm thrilled to be joined by a passionate young planner and the current Planning Institute of Australia Queensland Young Planners convener, Farnoosh Shokoofan. Farnoosh is an energetic and innovative planner, currently working as a strategic planner at Toowoomba Council. She was awarded a Bachelor degree of Urbanism and completed her Masters of Urban Design in 2018. Farnoosh has worked as a planner both in Iran and Australia within various planning and development disciplines. She's been an active Queensland Young Planner for 3 years. Born and raised in a megacity, Farnoosh is enthusiastic about people and place. Her interests include placemaking, behaviour settings and analysis of users' behaviour and natural disaster resilience, specifically landslide. Welcome to the podcast, Farnoosh. I'm pleased to have you today. How are you?
I'm very well, Nicole. Thank you for having me.
Not a problem. And thank you for joining me all the way from Toowoomba. I was just so keen to have you on the podcast. I really wanted to make sure that these episodes cover a range of views and particularly hear from young planners. And, you know, it's been a few episodes since I've had a young planner on the podcast. I think Nick Camels was the last one, which was earlier this year. And given your role overseeing the Young Planners group here in Queensland, I thought you'd just be the perfect person to find out some more about those key issues and opportunities that young planners are facing. How does that sound?
Yeah, sounds great. Thank you. I appreciate that.
Not a worry, but I thought maybe we could start at the beginning and find out what led you to becoming a planner.
Sure. So I might start with my childhood. So I think I've always been the artistic person in my family, and I painted, I played musical instruments, I was good at crafts since I was young, and I think those are some good qualities to have as a planner. And during school years, I was good at maths and physics as well. So it was a bit difficult to choose what I wanted to pursue as my future career. And choosing a career is quite different in Iran because switching to other professions, especially significant switches, is really not much of an option that is broadly promoted. So whatever field you choose, you'll pretty much pursue it until you retire. And just like many others, I was planning to be an architect, and I didn't have much of a clue about what planning was, but I still added it to my list of selected fields. I unfortunately didn't get the score to enroll for architecture, but that's how I got into the Bachelor of Urbanism. And as time passed, I grew more and more fond of the field and stayed in the field. And if I might add a bit to it, I might talk about why I'm still a planner.
Yeah, for sure.
I am also a bit of a perfectionist. So once I start something, I aim to achieve the best results in it. And that also applies to my career. And something that I really love about planning is the versatility of this profession and the fact that it's got quite vague borders with other fields. So it makes it so that almost anyone can find an area that piques their interest in this field. The only common factor in the different areas of planning is the human factor, in my opinion. And for the rest of it, the sky's the limit. And that makes this field so fascinating.
I love that. That's such a great observation. So with that in mind, what would you like to do with the next 5 years of your career? Where do you see planning taking you?
Yeah, so I think that I still haven't found my favorite area in the planning world yet. I also haven't used my skills and knowledge as an urban designer to its full potential. I'd love to work on projects related to my theses, which were around behavior setting analysis and creating an urban design framework for landslide resilience. I'm also planning on improving my public speaking skills further. And I think that's an area that many planners should focus on a lot more. I know that us as planners, we need a suite of skills in our field, but we often focus on either strengthening the skills used for works done in the background, such as problem solving skills or analysis skills, or we focus on skills such as presentation and public speaking, whereas I think that they go hand in hand. So we need to have both and strengthen both. And I think we should be able to promote the projects that we've spent months completing. But unfortunately, even in my short time in the industry, I've seen too many planners at different stages of their career lacking those skills. So yeah, I'm trying to improve at least those skills at the same time as much as I can.
Yeah, it's another great observation. It's like those technical skills versus those softer communication skills, and you need to have both, as you mentioned, because a great project, may be great, but if no one knows about it, then how do we kind of learn from it, and how do we kind of amplify its benefits? So I think that's great sort of advice for everyone to listen to. But really awesome to hear that's what you're going to be focusing on over the next little while.
Yeah.
And for the record, I think you do a great job of public speaking. I saw you at the PIA Great Debate hosting that, and that was an excellent event. So I think
thank you.
I think you're doing a great job there. I would love to find out what you think the key issues that young planners are most passionate about. So you obviously convene a group of very passionate young planners, and I'm sure those committee meetings are quite enjoyable and enlightening, and bring a bunch of passionate people together. So I'm keen for you to kind of distill what the key issues you're hearing from your fellow colleagues are.
And I think Toby's keynote during the Planning Congress touched on some really important matters. One being that young people, including the young planners, are a group that have been brought up in a world where we've felt inefficiencies, issues, and dangers that arise from climate and housing crisis and social injustice. So we really know what it's like to be mentally in a pressure to find housing, find a job, stay healthy in a world that's failing us economically, environmentally, and socially. So it is on the top of our list of actions. And young planners are passionate about taking action to solve the issues caused by humans, like protecting the environment, stopping urban sprawl, housing crisis, and land supply, which will only be amplified by more natural disasters such as flooding. And I've also touched on that at an event that we held together with the young architects and the young engineers a few months ago. I would really love to see more collaboration between the young professionals within the built environment area, or even the broader field, to solve these issues. And the Queensland Young Planners Committee also developed a survey which attests to this statement. We asked young planners about what is on their mind, and the top 3 areas that the young planners were passionate about and voted for were livability and housing, environmental planning, and infrastructure planning.
Yeah, that's really interesting. And do you think those issues are specific to young planners? I mean, it's interesting that you referenced Toby's keynote, and children are sort of 25% of the current world population, but he kind of referenced, young people are 100% of the future. And so I just wonder how do you think young planners view those issues differently to, say, more established planners?
Yeah, so I think, as I mentioned, it's not that these issues are specific to young planners, but I think Toby also mentioned that the young planners and young people see the world through a different lens, and we know what our priorities are, and we know what the must-haves and the essential issues are in order for us to be able to have a more sustainable and a healthier lifestyle. So it's not that it is unique to young planners when it comes to addressing these issues, but the fact that we put more emphasis on it, whereas the other planners look at a bigger set and series of problems, and they want to address all of those problems. So yeah, I guess it's just the emphasis or the focus that's a bit different when it comes to the young planners or young people.
Sure. There's a bit more of a sharper focus on those key issues. Yeah, interesting.
Yeah.
Okay, well, the next question I had for you, maybe in relation to those key issues of climate change and social injustice and those that you mentioned, do you think that the role of a planner is changing? And if so, how?
Yeah, and that's an interesting question, because I think that the role of planners has always been evolving based on what's required of it and the changing environment. And I think the problem is that the planning society has been a bit slow to respond to these changes. I again referred to another great discussion we heard at the PIA Congress when Dr. Tyson Yunkaporta talked about this issue in the yarn at the PIA Congress.
Yeah, that was fantastic, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was really fascinating. I loved how he was quite frank when talking about these issues, and had a different. He didn't beat around the bush, so I really loved that. I thought it was quite refreshing, and yeah, so he talks about the fact that the education system is preparing young planners for a world that no longer exists. And I think that the young professionals can clearly see that. And we have also started our career, both the young professionals and the young planners. We've either started our career or started our studies during this extremely uncertain time, which is the COVID-19 pandemic, when many were made redundant from their workplaces. And on the other side, we've seen how quickly the natural environment and the ecosystems heal once we, as humans, change the business as usual and stop our harmful routines that we've created over decades, including increasing urban sprawl and hence the desire to drive everywhere. So we've caught a glimpse of that healthier and more sustainable lifestyle for a year or two, which is enough evidence to make all planners, especially young planners, more determined to advocate for a change in the status quo at a faster pace. One more thing that I want to mention around the role of planners the changing role of planners is that an attribute that I'd like to see more in this ever-changing environment is for the planners to have more conviction.
Yeah.
Although planners consult with different stakeholders, they sometimes tend to forget the importance of their own professional opinions. And just one example of that would be that planning might influence the political decisions, but the planner's professional opinions should be free from politics and certainly not superseded by it, which is something that you see. Well, I've seen a lot of it back in Iran. The planner's recommendations being neglected and superseded by political decisions, which is really disheartening.
Yeah, and I think something that when I was in local government, held really close was that, my advice always needed to be frank and fearless. And it was a very wise planner who told me that. Yeah, I totally concur with that statement that you've made.
Yeah.
I did have a question, but it's just gone out of my mind. It was in relation to what you were discussing previously, but maybe it'll come back into my brain.
Sure.
Oh, that's right. No, it's around the role of planners, and it was about digital and technology. And I just wonder, and you sort of mentioned COVID and, and work from home and those sorts of different environment that, young planners and people who are studying planning are now, coming into. And, I was speaking with lecturers recently who said, they hadn't met some of the new planners in their class yet. It was this was the first year that they'd been able to actually have an in-person lecture or an in-person tutorial. And then, I know that there's been planners who have graduated university and started in the workplace and not actually met their bosses, for many months. And even planners who are, a couple of years out of uni and needing to sort of take on more responsibility, having to do a lot of that from home and sort of without that incidental conversations that are happening, in the office. And I just wonder, what impact kind of all of that is going to have. I know there's a lot of positives from working from home, but whether the kind of impact on skills or knowledge transfer on young planners, will be seen in years to come. I don't know whether you had any thoughts on that.
Yeah, definitely. So I actually have experienced that myself, because when I started working at the council, it was only a few months before the pandemic. So I only experienced working with my team for a few months. Then I had to work from home for around a year, which was more time than I've spent with my team at one space, which was quite challenging for me, and it was quite difficult. So I think it would be the same for the other young planners. And I think people and young professionals at the early stages of their career are more susceptible to the negative impacts of not being able to work in the same space, because, as you said, there are so many benefits when it comes to working in one space and sharing that knowledge, sharing all those skills. And it just doesn't happen when you're working away or working from home. And that's why I think young professionals, especially the ones at the very start of their career have it more it's harder for them to cope and learn and improve their skills in that situation.
Yeah, totally. I think we just have to all be a little bit more mindful of that, because when I sort of came out of university, or even through university, I never had we used to have lecture recordings that went online, but, that was kind of after the fact, and it really wasn't something that you sort of did unless you were unwell, or, it was just every lecture you went in person pretty much. And, going into the workplace, there really wasn't work from home as an option. And, I love it now being, more of a mid-tier planner. I can work from home quite comfortably, but I do feel for some of the younger planners that, rely upon kind of that transfer of knowledge within the workplace. So, yeah, we all just need to be a bit more mindful, I think.
Yeah, exactly.
The last question I had for you was in relation to what are the new skills young planners are bringing to the profession?
So I think that young planners in general, I think we've touched on it, but they are more tech savvy and internet resourceful. And this skill, combined with young planners' tendency to network with a broader range of professionals from different fields, provides more opportunities to collaborate with those fields and explore and expand the edges of our areas of expertise, which is, I think, great, because there's so much potential there. And yeah, I think, again, I've touched on that, but young people in general see the world in a different lens. And something that I think is more evident in young planners might not be a skill, but is an attribute, is their inquisitive tendencies and curiosity. Something that is a hobby of mine and I've loved doing is I love reading philosophical books. And one of my favorite quotes is from a philosophy book called Sophie's World.
Yeah, okay.
A part of this book talks about how humans lose their curiosity as they grow up and are more certain about how this world we live in functions. But that's exactly the only thing, the book quotes, that's exactly the only thing we're required to be good philosophers, which is the faculty of wonder. And I think it applies to us planners as well. The young planners tend to be really curious, be really open to learning. And I think all planners should stay curious and flexible, because those two qualities put the spotlight on the context and remind us to always find solutions based on the context.
What a great place to leave the podcast. That's fantastic. The faculty of wonder. Stay curious and stay flexible. Wow. Thanks, Farnoosh. That's excellent. Well, thank you so much for your time today, Farnoosh. It's been so great getting to know you and learning about the important work that young planners do and the important perspective that you bring to planning. Thank you for leading this group of passionate planners, and keep doing what you're doing, because I can see all the amazing work that you guys are doing together, and it's really inspiring and uplifting for us planners that have been in the industry a little bit longer.
Thanks, Dol. Yeah, it's great.
Awesome. And thank you for tuning into the Hustle and Bustle podcast this week. If you've enjoyed this episode, please leave a rating and a review so that others find out about the show. You can follow us on Instagram, hustle_bustle_podcast, and LinkedIn too. That's all from this episode. Thanks again for listening. I'll catch you next time. Bye for now.